Well, good evening. Uh, the power's out in North Park tonight after being on all day through all the storm and all the seepage that we dealt with. And now we're relatively dry, and then the power goes out. But hey, we depend on all this technology. This technology is not 100% trustworthy. They do their best, I know. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do probably a couple of little videos tonight. We'll obviously have to try to converse about Todd Wood and Daryl Falk in Wednesday's class, and I encourage you to stay up with the reading. Rather than pull out the book and do anything with that, I want to talk about sort of like the background of or the heart of this difference between Daryl and Falk and Todd Wood. I think it's important that I express that I'm I'm really, I think in substantial agreement with Daryl Falk. I don't agree with everything he says or every way he puts the things he says, but in general, I agree with his argument. Now, here's the and now let me try to talk about Todd Charles Wood's perspective and try to do it dispassionately and as objectively as I can. Wood, as we know, has a PhD in evolutionary biology. He's not a stranger to the science or the evidence or the arguments, and he's already acknowledged in this some of his writing in this book that he knows that evidence is pretty strong. Um, he's not trying to disprove evolutionary theory, we're told, but rather to more positively put forth evidence of a scientific nature that the young earth creationist reading of Genesis is justified, scientifically justified. That he hopes to garner scientific evidence to support a very young Earth, a very young universe. I mean, old by our standards of how long we live, but by the stretch of time that most geologists, astronomers, cosmologists, did I say geologists? Biologists, all the evidence coming in from a variety of avenues, I believe, tends to coalesce in very comparable numbers for the age of the universe, which is considerably older than the age of the Earth. You're familiar with those numbers. Well, as I understand it, Todd is, I will say, stubbornly committed to a young earth perspective, really on the basis of how he interprets, I would say, the opening chapter of Genesis, and then the genealogies that you find, I think, primarily in Genesis. I don't know if young earth people have to go beyond Genesis or if that does it for them. But it's basically a matter of calculating, as we've said, years listed in genealogies minus the years in common between a father, usually it's the father and the son, and come up with a figure between 6,000 and 10,000 years for the age of the earth and essentially for the universe, right? This is predicated, I'll say again, on reading Genesis for scientific information. We might ask, why does Todd read it that way? And I think the answer he'd give is because that's what it says. And we take it, or he takes it at face value as being historically accurate and scientifically relevant. Why do people do that? What leads them to that assumption? And some of you know that probably, and I'm not going to try to speak for everybody, but probably the primary argument for this is found in, or of this reading of the Bible, is found in, I think it's in 1st or 2nd Timothy. I am in candlelight here, essentially. And shucks, I thought I knew right where that passage is. Is it Timothy? Yeah, it's Timothy. So maybe it's 1st Timothy. Let's try 1st Timothy. Hang on with me. Maybe 3, 4, 1st Timothy. I know that somebody that's watching this is going, I know where it is. Oh, let's Google. All scripture is God-breathed. Let's find out where that is. If I have a little, I think I can get it here with my SCRIP is God-breathed. 2 Timothy 3. So I was there. I kind of looked. Oh, right there. Okay. 2 Timothy in the New Testament. Some of you are going, yeah, I knew. 2 Timothy chapter 3, beginning at verse 16. All scripture is inspired by God. We'll just stop there for a minute. This is, of course, a New Testament letter written well before there was a New Testament. We'll just say that, before there was a New Testament. There were Gospels and various writings, letters of Paul and so on, that circulated among early churches. But when we read all Scripture, we would need to know or recognize at least that primarily, and certainly for the author, that would be what we call the Old Testament, because the New Testament isn't yet formulated or assembled. It would be several centuries before the church officially zeroed in on the 27 documents that all Christians affirm as composing the New Testament. So when it says all Scripture is inspired by God, and it's in a New Testament letter that isn't part of there, and there is no New Testament yet, I'll just say it again, that for the author, this would refer to the Hebrew Bible. Now, one can certainly make an argument that just because this statement appears in a New Testament letter, that doesn't disqualify it as descriptive of the whole Bible, including the New Testament. I think that's true. So I'm not making that like a knockdown thing. I am saying that we should even. Well, I'll come back to that later. So we'll grant the possibility that it's the whole Bible rather than simply the Old Testament. All Scripture is, and then this word inspired is theopneustos. Theo is God, and pneustos is breathed. So this term inspired, and you see, to inspire literally is to breathe into, in terms of the etymology of the word. Our word spirit's in there, and we've talked, I think, already about spirit as breath or wind or spirit in the New Testament and in the Old. In the Old Testament, it's the term ruach, but of course, this is the New Testament. So here it's the term pneuma. So hear it again, theopneustos, Pneu. There's where the pneuma is in the word theopneustos. That's translated inspired here. So straightforwardly, this says all scripture is inbreathed by God, or God breathed. Okay, God dash breathed. Now, there is a tradition within Christianity, especially in certain forms of Protestantism, to interpret God breathed in a very specific way. And that way is that every word is breathed out by God, that this is God's literally words almost. I don't think it would have to lead to the idea that God dictates every word, but at its most extreme, it does suggest that God dictates every word of the Bible. So when either of our authors talk about God writing the Bible, I think it's really important to say God didn't write the Bible. There are human writers, there are human authors. Now, what it means for their scriptures, their writings to be God breathed, that's an important matter. So here's what I'm going to suggest to you quickly, and this will be the first, so that I don't overrun this thing. We need to think about how God breathed functions in the rest of the Bible. Do we have instances of God breathing, basically? And the answer is yes, we do. The first one occurs in Genesis 2, when we read that God breathed into this lump of clay that apparently God had shaped in a more or less human form. I'm going to tell you again, I do not take this as a literal depiction of the beginnings of the human race or of human beings. But I do see theological significance, and there's a difference between those. A theological meaning and significance in reading that God breathed into this lump of clay and this became a living being. Okay, so the first human, according to Genesis, is God breathed. Okay, God breathed. Breath, or pneuma, or ruach in the Hebrew, has to do with life, the giving of life. So this lifeless lump of mud becomes alive. How? By the breath of God. We'll stop there and continue these thoughts on theopneustos, God breathed.